Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you are very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. I have seen multiple requests for a video on today's subject. The story we're looking at is one that I arguably could, even should have covered in a video that I made a few years back. That video was on King John and it looked at just how bad he actually was. I will leave it linked. In this video, I explored many, but nowhere near all of the allegations that have and were levelled against this king. Because John's rap sheet, so to speak, is a long one. So long, in fact, that it's led some to query whether it's been inflated, simply to attempt to try to damage his reputation further. Either way, what John is said to have done to the Braose family and why he did it is certainly worthy of investigation. And so that is what we'll be doing today. Without further ado, let's take a look at Matilda de Braose and her family. Matilda, also known as Maud, is thought to have been born in France in the middle of the 12th century. Her parents were Bernard de St. Valery, Lord of Beckley, Oxfordshire, and his first wife, who was also, somewhat confusingly, called Matilda. Next to nothing is known of our Matilda's early life or education. She was reputed to be tall, beautiful, wise and vigorous. In around 1166, when she was in her teens most likely, she married the magnate and landholder William de Braose. William's great-grandfather was a Norman lord who had been favoured with grants and lands by William the Conqueror. Through a combination of royal favour and advantageous marriages, the Braoses continued to acquire lands and to expand the reach of their powers. Matilda's husband did the same as his ancestors. He would come to hold, or at least in some cases exert control over, lands and castles in England, Wales and Ireland. These holdings provided amply for this couple and for the brood of children they would go on to have. At least 4 sons and 5 daughters, with some scholars saying there may have been as many as 16 children born to this couple. The royal favour that Matilda and William enjoyed resulted from and was dependent upon a few things. Their bloodline, so in particular the generational bonds that existed between royal families and those of their magnates. Whether or not those successive monarchs continued to trust and enjoy the company of each successive magnate. On top of this, it was required that they showed skill and success in serving their king at home and abroad. In this regard, William served as King Richard I's sheriff in Herefordshire. He provided this king with his military support on the Welsh borders. And in this pursuit, William behaved with a level of murderous brutality that reportedly earned him the nickname the Ogre of Abergavenny. William also supported his monarch's military endeavours on the continent, in both 1194 and 1199. He was therefore at Richard's side during his final campaign. Richard I would receive his final mortal wound and die at Chaillot on the 6th of April 1199. Whenever William had been away, dealing with King Richard's business on the continent or at court, his wife Matilda was left to ensure the continued smooth running and security of their lands and holdings. This, at times, involved her displaying military acumen to maintain her husband and, by extension, her king's control on the Welsh borders and beyond. During the siege of Payne's Castle in 1198, Matilda was able to hold out for the weeks it took for reinforcements to arrive to support her. In the aftermath of this, the castle came to be known as the Castle of Matilda. At around the same time, a legend began to develop that asserted that Matilda had built the nearby Castle of Hay all by herself in a single night, having transported the stones required to do so in her own skirts. The contemporary historian Gerald of Wales wrote admiringly of Matilda's capacity to manage the lands that she had charge of, but also of her ability to further enrich and expand them. Matilda and William were a team, and they were a successful one at that, at least for a time. When Richard I's brother, John, succeeded him as king, this family did continue to occupy a place of trust, prominence, and privilege. With that being said, the new king, John, did choose to remove William from the role of Sheriff of Herefordshire in 1200. That was the year after he had ascended to the throne. But I don't think this should necessarily be viewed as evidence of a profound fall from royal favour on his part. William had, after all, been integral to firming up the support that ultimately allowed John to be recognised as his elder brother's heir, instead of their shared nephew, Arthur of Brittany. Arthur was the son of John's elder brother, Geoffrey, that was Richard's younger brother, and so his claim to the throne was arguably superior to John's own. However, Arthur was still a child in 1199, and when Richard lay dying, it was John that was named as his successor. King John evidently wanted William de Braose by his side in the early years of his rule. As Ralph V. Turner points out, William was, quote, one of the most frequent witnesses to his, meaning John's, charters. John was also happy for William to enlarge his holdings in Wales by conquest. The new king then added to these lands with grants of others. But John did not only grant William Welsh territories. Under John, he also obtained further holdings in England and in Ireland. John cancelled debts that William and his father had owed to John's predecessors, to Richard I and to Henry II respectively. William would, however, go on to accumulate new and large debts as John's reign went on. And so if for some reason this family should fall afoul of their new king, if they should do something to earn his disfavour or distrust, then these now mounting debts would leave them very vulnerable. Their king could call, or even threaten to call, all of those debts in. Royal favour and trust now stood between this family and destitution, even total destruction. Now, my grandmother was a, shall we say, intense woman who used to tell me that the only way for two people to keep a secret is if one of them are dead. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, John was a king with secrets. One of those secrets was what had happened to John's nephew, his rival claimant for the throne, Arthur of Brittany. In 1203, rumours were circulating that John had ordered Arthur's murder. Some even said that he had killed the boy himself in a fit of drunken rage. William was the one who had captured Arthur during the Battle of Mirabeau, and it's thought that he was with John at the time of Arthur's disappearance or death. William might have witnessed the deed. He may even have encouraged it. Before long, these secret-knowing debtors of the king appeared to have become a focus of his suspicion. The Braoses had been allowed to become powerful. Is it possible they were now overmighty? Were they plotting with John's enemies? Were they discussing the fate of Arthur among themselves and or with others? After all, William is believed to be the source of the account of Arthur's demise that can be found in the Annals of Margam. Quote, after dinner on the Thursday before Easter, being April 3rd, 1203, when he, John, was drunk and possessed by the devil, he slew him, meaning Arthur, with his own hand, and tying a heavy stone to the body, cast it into the Seine. It was discovered by a fisherman in his net, and being dragged to the bank and recognised, and taken for secret burial, in fear of the tyrant, to the priory of Bec, called Notre-Dame-des-Prés. King John soon set about stripping William of some of his honours. He also worked to reorganise those who were holding positions of power around William in such a way as they might most effectively threaten this family's holdings and authority over them. Then, in 1208, John decided that he wanted Matilda and William's sons to be handed over to him to act as hostages for their parents' good behaviour. Matilda's response to this royal command was, shall we say, indiscreet, because when refusing her king, it's reported that she expressed fear for her sons' lives, and that she also made reference to John's murder of Arthur. When John learned of her words, he was furious. His suspicions surrounding this family seem only to have increased. In the same year, In the March of 1208, Pope Innocent III placed John's dominions under interdict. This was following the king's refusal to accept the Pope's choice of Stephen Langton as the new Archbishop of Canterbury. After the issuing of this interdict, Matilda and William's third son Giles, who was by that point Bishop of Hereford, chose to flee into France, presumably because he was one that had approved the interdict and was perhaps rightly concerned about royal reprisals. King John would be excommunicated by the Pope in the following year, in the November of 1209. Then, in 1210, most likely in the September, King John produced a document in which he detailed all the ways that he felt the Braoses had failed and betrayed him. He wrote of the money this family still owed him. He accused them of thefts and other crimes, including forest offences. This family had previously tried to pacify their vengeful king. Back in 1208, not long after she spoke those indiscreet words, Matilda reportedly sent a fine herd of cattle to John's wife and queen, Isabella of Angoulême. William surrendered Hay, Brecon and Radnor castles. He also handed over hostages and he mortgaged his English lands, all in the hope of pacifying John. Nevertheless, the king would claim in that same 1210 document that after surrendering these castles back in 1208, William and two of his sons then went on to attack them, before spreading their violence out through Herefordshire. William was summoned to John's court. He refused, claiming ill health. In response, the king ordered the arrest of this family. William, Matilda and their two eldest sons promptly fled into Ireland, but John would not be dissuaded. He began to gather troops and was making ready to invade Ireland. William, no doubt seeing the danger that loomed on the horizon, tried to come to terms with his king. He offered him a frankly enormous, borderline ludicrous sum as a ransom or fine. John considered it and decided he would only agree to accept it if Matilda were surrendered to him as a hostage as well. William and John were now at stalemate. Over a couple of months in the summer of 1210, the Braoses' lands in Ireland were seized. Many of their allies there also suffered similarly. Matilda and her eldest son, named William for his father, tried to flee into Scotland. They made it fairly far, but unfortunately they were captured by a Scottish lord, Duncan of Carrick, who handed them over to King John. Mother and son were imprisoned, first at Bristol Castle. Matilda and her husband both separately reiterated their willingness to pay that enormous ransom they'd offered earlier. This was said to amount to 50,000 marks. And as I said, this was a ludicrous, indeed almost impossible sum for them to have believably obtained. William, Matilda's husband, was however given the chance to raise that amount. He took the opportunity to flee in disguise to France, where he joined his son Giles, the one who'd fled there a couple of years earlier. It is thought that William also took the opportunity to inform the French court of the truth of Arthur of Brittany's fate, which would not have helped King John's situation. After her husband's flight, Matilda was clear. She could not and would not pay the king, and so Matilda and her son were moved, either to Windsor or to Corfe Castle. If you ever visit Corfe Castle, they will make it very clear that it was in fact there that Matilda and William were imprisoned. Held together in one of John's dungeons, it is said they were left to starve to death. It is also said that when mother and son were checked on some days later, and found to be deceased, that Matilda was found leaning against her son. It appeared reportedly that he had died first, and that his desperate, starving mother had torn at her son's cheeks in the forlorn hope of finding food to sustain herself. The horror of this event is believed by some to have motivated the inclusion of Clause 39 of Magna Carta from 1215, which states that, quote, "No free man shall be seized or imprisoned, or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his standing in any way. Nor will we proceed with force against him, or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals, or by the law of the land. William de Braose did not long outlive his wife and eldest son. Indeed, contemporary sources would allege that he died of grief upon hearing the news of their deaths. William died near Paris on the 4th of September 1211. As for what remained of his family, his living sons, daughters and grandchildren, they would only really see better days after the death of King John and the accession of his son as King Henry III. And as for John, the remainder of his reign was a period of near constant threat and fighting, with the dangers coming both from at home and abroad. So what do you think of the Braose family, of their successes and of their fall? What do you think of King John's treatment of them, and how much do you think that treatment would go on to amplify the issues that this king faced? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comments section underneath this video. I'd also love it if you could pop an emoji or a social glyph in the comments too, because that will boost the engagement. And it's said by YouTube, the more engagement a video gets, the more YouTube shares it out, and that should help us to grow our community. I'm not sure what to pick. Maybe a castle, maybe something that looks a bit like a king, or a crown, or something battly. You pick. I look forward to seeing what you choose. You can find me elsewhere on social media. I will leave links to all the places you can find me on the internet in my description box. Please do follow me over on some or all of those so we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please share it with your friends. If you like my channel, let some pals know about it. You can tell me you like this video in particular by hitting the thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel, and if you think you are subscribed, now is the ideal time to check, just to make sure you've not been unsubscribed mysteriously against your will. While you're there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, please do hit the bell icon that sits beside the subscribe button and then select all in the drop down that will appear, and that way YouTube claim they will tell you when I've next uploaded, but also when I'm going to go live, which I do a couple of times a month to talk about the history news. You are not going to want to miss that. Have got a fail-safe, of course. If you head over to my website, it's www.katrinamarchant.com. It will be linked. If you go to the contact page, you'll find a box. Put your email address in that box, and then when you submit it, I will be able to send you a message once a week to let you know what I've been up to, but also to send you any useful links for my content that you might want for the coming days. I hope you're going to have a great day whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.